Good morning, everyone. Let's do a little test. Can you guys hear me? All right. I've never gone live before, so this is a test. If it's not good quality, I apologize. I'm a substitute. I'm a substitute for Brett today. So if it's not good quality, just blame Brett. All right. I'm just a substitute. Okay. All right. So some data coming out right now. Let's go ahead and get started. It's 8:30. It's Thursday, April 30th. Let's go ahead and get started. We have some data coming out right now. All right. Jobless claims just came out, 189K, and GDP just came out 2%, as well as some PCE price index, which came out at forecast. All right. Good morning, everyone. For those who are just joining, let's go ahead, get started. All right. I'm substitute Mike. If the quality's not good, blame Brett. I hope it works. Let's go. Okay. All right. Here's some data just came out. And I want to go ahead and jump over to the earnings calendar. Okay. So, earnings calendar. Who reported yesterday? Some big names: Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Google. Right? All reported on the same day. And today we have Apple earnings after hours. So, big moves, a lot of stuff happening in the overnight. I'm going to show you guys ES. I'm going to show you guys NQ. A lot of things were happening overnight. And I think the market's still trying to digest exactly what it wants to do. And maybe after Apple earnings today, we'll see some real clarity. But that's it really for the earnings and the economic data. So let's go ahead and just jump into the charts. Okay. All right. Before I get started, I just want to make sure that you guys can see the charts. Let me know. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. So what is going on? A lot happened in the overnight session. You can't really see it as much here on SPY. That's why I'm going to show ES first. All right. ES is the futures contract, right, for SPY, for the S&P 500. So look at what happened. After these major earnings came out yesterday, we had an initial, this was at 4 o'clock, right? We had an initial pop and then sell. And then we came all the way up into 7,200 and then sold from like 9 p.m. to midnight. And now we're popping back into supply. So a lot happened, a lot of up and down in the overnight. And market, I think, is still kind of digesting. We're still seeing Middle Eastern tension. You know, Iran is saying that they're going to blow us up if we blow them up. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens in the Middle East. But a lot of things going on this chart, right? So what can we do today? We can watch a couple of different things. Okay. So 7180 on ES. This is SPY 712. I'll jump back to SPY. 712 was our pivot the past couple of days, right? We took this short on Tuesday. Brett and I both took this short on Tuesday, and it worked again yesterday. Yesterday off that 712 again. If you took that short, that worked. Okay. So that's my pivot for today's session. Are we above this 712? Then we can look for longs. If we get back below 712, I will definitely be looking for shorts into 709. Okay. And then 709 is the capitulation level. If we get below 709, then we can see that big sell back into that 703, 702 level from earlier last week, right? Tuesday and Wednesday of last week. But it really just depends what happens off the open, right? Previous all-time high is 716.50, okay? 716.50 is previous all-time high on SPY. If we reclaim that, then potentially we could see longs into 720, okay? That's where some squeeze momentum could come in, and we could see the market squeeze into 720, all right? But if we sell off the open, right, if we lose this 712, and then I would actually look for shorts, right? If we get back below 712, I'm looking for shorts into 709. And what is that level on ES? Okay, it's 7180. 7180 is the level on ES. 7200 was actually some overnight supply, right? Which is just like the key psychological whole number. So 7200 is where we failed in the overnight. But really where I would want to see to go short again and actually be confident to go short is if we get back under 7180. If we hold 7180, we can look for longs, okay? and then 72.20 was the previous all-time high. So if we take that 72.20 out on ES, then we could see much higher potentially on this chart, right? That's where the squeeze volume can come in, okay? So that's SPY and ES. Now let's look at NQ and QQQ, okay? So NQ, overnight session high, 27,600. And you see the same thing happen on SPY, on ES and NQ, right? We saw an immediate pop. Well, actually, it was like a drop from the earnings reaction. And then we popped into like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And then we sold all the way back down at 2 a.m. in the overnight session. And now we're kind of grinding back up, but we have yet to break all-time highs, right? So are we going to break all-time highs? If we do, then we could see upside, right? So if NQ breaks 27,600 today, then we could see upside. We can look for longs. But if we get back below 27,300, which was the 661 level on the Qs, I took this yesterday. That's a really nice level. So if we get back below 27,300, we can look for shorts into 27,000, okay? And I'm going to show you this on the Qs as well. All right, QQQ, 661. This was the high day of the session yesterday. Big reject there. 654 is the big level, though, for capitulation. If we're going to get short, we have to get under 661 into 654. If we lose 654, this can go all the way back down to 650 or lower. But vice versa, if we reclaim all-time highs, which was that NQ 27,600, and that's going to be around 667 on the Qs. If we reclaim that 667, then this turns into a squeeze, and we can actually look for longs intraday. All right. But 661 is my bull bear pivot for the session. All right. We get back under 661, it turns into a short. Okay. So market's still digesting. Let's see what happens. But those are that's SPY and QQQ. That's the NQ and ES levels that I'm watching for today. All right. All right. So let's jump into some individuals now. All right. So Apple, I already mentioned this. Apple has earnings in the after hours today. Apple has earnings today. I won't be touching this. Now, what I will be watching for in after earnings, right? Will Apple break above 276? Or will we get below 265 and 262? If you guys remember, this 262 is a big level we traded off of. 265 has been the recent level of demand. How does Apple react after earnings? And then based on how we react, we potentially take trades on that. But I will not be trading Apple today because they have earnings in the after hours. IV will be high, contracts will be elevated, contracts won't move well. All right, so this is not something I'll be watching intraday today. All right. Let's look at some other names. AMD, it already bounced off the 310. This was the gap fill level on the daily, right? You guys see this big gap? We already bounced off 310, okay? So now it's just back into supply. I mean, honestly, 350 to 355 is all-time highs, and that is supply on AMD. You don't want to be long into 350 to 355. If we break above 355, then you can look for longs. At that point, it's just in price discovery mode. It's at all-time highs. So you could look for longs if we get over 355. But I am not really watching AMD today. I am watching Amazon, though. So Amazon was one of the names that reported earnings yesterday. They crushed. They beat EPS expectations by 70%. And they beat on revenue by $4 billion, right? 2.3% surprise on revenue. And earnings was a 70% surprise, right? So big beat on Amazon. I have a level at 266, right? The high from Monday was actually 267, but the session high from yesterday was 266. And this is also the pre-market low, right? This is the pre-market session low, previous day high, 266. If Amazon holds 266, I like this for longs, right? I like that 266 for longs on Amazon, okay? Google, another name, reported earnings yesterday. They beat as well. All the big tech crushed. I don't know why EPS expectations were so low. It's like they did this on purpose or something. EPS expectations were very low, and they crushed. They beat by 90% on EPS. And on revenue, they beat by $2.9 billion, 2.73% surprise on revenue, okay? So big upside on Google. It's up 7%. Google is now at all-time highs, right? You go to the 4-hour, it's never been this high before. Google is at all-time highs, right? So how can you trade at all-time highs? you can draw fib levels, right? So what you could do is draw a fib from the low of the reaction yesterday to the pre-market high today. And you could look for a bounce at the 61.8 fib, which is around 360. Okay, so we could look for a bounce at either 360 or the previous session high at 356, right? That's all you can really do on a name like Google that's already up, 7.5%, and it's trading into all-time highs, right? So we could look for a bounce at 360, look for a bounce at 356. I don't know if either one of those will happen today, but that's something that you can watch if it does, all right? Another name that reported earnings yesterday, Meta. Meta got crushed. Meta is down 8.4%. They actually beat on both as well, right? They beat on EPS by 56%. Again, I don't know what's up with these tech EPS expectations, why they were so low, but they crushed. They crushed on EPS and revenue. They beat by a bit, 750 million, 1.3%. Okay, but the stock is reacting negatively. I think it was to their capex. They elevated their full year capex guidance, and I don't think the market reacted positively to that. Maybe investors are thinking they're spending too much money on future innovation. I don't know. I didn't read too much into the report, but I did see that headline about the capex data. Okay, so what can you watch on Meta? Meta was the weakest of the reports, right? Meta is down 8.5%. I have a big level here at 630. This was a previous demand from February. It's a huge level. So you could either watch for a rejection at 630, all right? Or you could wait for it to come all the way back up here. I don't know if this will happen, right? But that was the previous demand from just the past week, okay? But 630 or 653 for rejects. And the other option is if it continues selling today, I don't know if it'll continue selling all the way down to 580, but 580 is the big demand, right? This is that 4-hour demand. I'll zoom out some. So there's obviously the key psychological whole number at 600, but my big pivot is 580. This was back here from November. That's just a big level, right? So if Meta gets to 580 today, I don't know if that'll happen or not. Then we could potentially look for longs there. Otherwise, it's a short if we pop back into supply at 630 or at 650, okay? All right. Microsoft was the other name that reported yesterday. This name is flat. I'm not watching anything on Microsoft. It's flat. It's down 0.75%. Really no reaction, okay? And it's still within the range. So I have my level is 412 on Microsoft. This was this big hourly level from back here. You saw a pivot off of that on Thursday of last week, okay? So my range for Microsoft is 412 and 432. It's flat right now. If we get back above 432, this can potentially see into that earnings high at like 444, all right, 445. If we get under 412, then this turns into a short, back into 404, which was this low down here from Monday, or into 400, obvious number, okay? So, but this is flat. I'm not really watching anything. It's just still within the range. It has to break one or the other side, okay? Netflix, I talked about Netflix 90 to 91 demand. So far, it's holding that, right? We got a big bounce off of 90 on Tuesday. And then yesterday, we got a bounce off of 91. It's holding demand, okay? But this does have a gap fill. I will show you on the daily. If for whatever reason, Netflix loses 90, it's going to fill this gap into, 86.5, which was the high from that February 26th, that Thursday, okay? So if Netflix gets below 90, it's going to sell to 86.50. It'll fill the gap. However, as long as we hold 90, it's a bull chart. It's a bull chart. And if we actually break out of this little hourly downtrend, which is what it's kind of been waiting for, right? If we break out of this hourly downtrend, then this can turn into a squeeze back into 95, right? 95, you guys see that level, this low here, this high here. All right, so if this holds 90, 91, and we start reclaiming, creating higher lows, which is already starting to do, then we're going back into 95. If we lose 90, it's going to 86.50. All right, very simple on Netflix. Nvidia, I actually am watching this. So 212, I took this beautiful short yesterday. This wound up being an amazing trade. It did chop around quite a bit, so we weren't able to catch the full move. But this 212 short, right? I talked about this in the pre-market with Brett on live yesterday. We waited for this candle to close weak, and then we took the retest of 212, and we sold down here into new lows. We sold down here like 18, 20%, and we wound up getting trailed out of runners within this chop. But this did come all the way down and test that demand, that big demand at 207.50. Okay. So there's really two things that I'm watching on Nvidia today. I'm watching either the reclaim of 212. This was that previous all-time high. This was the level that I traded off of yesterday, right? So if Nvidia can reclaim 212, then this turns into a long for me back into 215 or whatever, 214.50, whatever these highs are from Tuesday, Wednesday, 214. Yeah, it's like 214.50. Reclaim 212. We can look for longs. But I'm also watching if market turns weak, we get below this 207.50. You guys see this demand right here, right here, right here, right? We get below 207.50. This is going to sell all the way back down to 204, which was the high from last Thursday. All right. So we have, we have a couple of dollars of upside if it gets above 212. And if it gets below 207.50, we have a few dollars to the downside, right? So those are the two levels that I'm watching on Nvidia. It could go either way. It really depends on what happens with the market today. But I do like this chart. And it's one of the names that, didn't have earnings this week. So it was trading very clean, free flowing yesterday. You guys saw that reaction off of 212. There was no chop. There was no hesitancy. It didn't, fake people out. It just hit 212 and snapped back down into lows. And that was really clean. So I like the way it traded yesterday. Maybe I'll trade it again today. Let's see what happens off the open. Okay. Let's see. PLTR, I talked about this on the pre-market with Brett yesterday as well, that 140 level. All right. We broke 140, sold into 134. They have earnings next week on Monday, right? They have earnings in just a couple of days. At this point, I would be careful trading this name with earnings just a couple of days away. But if it reclaims 140, it turns into a long again. All right. Very simple. 140 is the level. Okay. 140 breakdown, it's a short. We're below 140, it's a short. Above 140, it's a long. All right. Very simple on pounds here. And we'll look at Tesla as well. So Tesla is still range bound. Tesla 368 was our big demand, right? You guys see this level, 368. Obviously, there's that low from, what is this, Monday? The low was 364, okay? So really, you would need to break both of those for capitulation. But 368 is my level. This is obviously a range, okay? If 383 reclaims, though, this turns into a long again. If 383 reclaims, we can go all the way back to these highs up here at 408. All right. So we just have to wait. I mean, honestly, with Tesla, you have to wait to see which side breaks down. We break down to the downside, this turns into a short. If we reclaim that 383, it turns into a long. All right. All right. So that's basically everything that I'm watching today. Let's see. Do you guys have any tickers you want me to go over before I finish the live? CVNA, AVGO. All right, let's look at those. CVNA, Carvana. Yeah, Carvana is a scam. I talked about this on my story. So 44% of all of their loans are to subprime borrowers. And of those 44%, over 80% are deep subprime. All right. Deep subprime, really shitty credit. A lot of these, I've been seeing a lot of these Carvana sales associates aren't even doing VICO verification. They're not doing income verification. And that's sketch to me. That's just sketch across the book. And auto delinquency rates are at 32-year highs. All right. Auto loan delinquency rates across subprime borrowers are at 32-year highs. This is not, Carvana is literally geared toward non-prime, subprime, deep subprime borrowers. This is not a company that I would want to be a long-term investor in, honestly. Not right now. I mean, maybe if they change their business model, but there's a lot of things against Carvana. There's been like 2 major short reports come out against them. You guys can go through all those details online. You can look it up. It's getting a pop after earnings. I don't know why. I guess they beat earnings. Okay. But these things take a while to factor in. All right. Things like loan delinquency and defaults, it takes a long time to factor in. I don't know if you guys remember the 2007, 2008 housing bubble. That took years for the market to price it in, right? So sometimes, yeah, you may see like short-term upside on a name like Carvana, but that doesn't mean you want to be a long-term shareholder if you know what's really going on behind the scenes, right? It's the same thing as the housing bubble. Like you don't, it may take years for Carvana to wind up being a short, right? But that doesn't mean you want to be a long-term shareholder. That's the only thing I would recommend is be careful with Carvana. They have a lot of shitty loans, okay? A lot of really, really bad loans out there to people who probably won't pay the loans back, okay? All right, so be careful with Carvana. I did get a pop after earnings. I mean, if we're just talking about technicals here, then I'll tell you 416, right? 416 was the previous level from last week. And then below that, it's this demand. I mean, this is the most obvious demand right here, 393. We bounced off it 1, 2, 3, 4 times on the hourly. All right. So it's 393 is demand. 416, we broke above that. I don't know why it's selling right now. Probably people are trying to short it. I mean, yeah. But let's see. Avgo was the other one you guys mentioned. Avgo, they didn't report earnings. Okay. What do I see here on Avgo? I don't see a lot. Let's see. 415. Actually, I do. 415. 415 is the level. This was the demand from Monday. This is the after hours high. If we get above 415, you might get a push into 420 or 424. All right. Those are the next levels of supply. All right. Hood, Hems, SoFi. Oh, yeah, we could talk about some of these. All right. SoFi for sure. SoFi, I like this as a long-term hold. You know, even though they had a pretty big downside yesterday, down 15%. I was buying shares yesterday during this dip. They actually beat earnings and they had a lot of records this past quarter. It's just, you know, sometimes market reacts to it. You know, maybe temporarily the price is not aligning with fundamentals for right this second, right? But as fundamentals catch up to price, then we can see stability. With SoFi, though, I do think this is a long-term hold. You know, 15. If you're just a technical trader, then it's 15. 15 has to hold if you're just a technical trader. If you're a fundamental trader and you like the financials and you think this has a long-term perspective, like if you think this is a good long-term hold based on the financials, you just hold, right? And you dollar cost average as it approaches big demands. But if you're just a technical trader and you want to have tight stops, then you long here, right? And you have stops below 15. Very simple, right? 15 is the level it has to hold for technical traders, right? For fundamental traders, it's a little bit different, right? If you're just looking at the finances, it's a little bit different, right? Hood also had a great earnings. I mean, they missed a little bit, but expectations were already pretty high, and you know, they had a lot of record numbers as well. So they had a negative reaction, of course, right? Down 13%. Again, like the current price of stock may be slightly different than the book value of the stock. But if you're a long-term believer in Robinhood and the growth of the company and you like the product and you like their innovation and you like the C table, right? You like the C-suite execs and you think that they're doing a good job, then you just dollar cost average into demands and you hold it long term. If you don't like the stock, you don't like the company, then you just trade it technically, right? If you're just a technical trader, then you have to use previous levels, right? This was the previous high from last year. This was the low from this year, from March. If you're just a technical trader, you want to see Robinhood hold 65, right? And you could long now with 65 as your stop, right? But that's pretty much it. Like if you're a technical trader, you want it to hold these lows from March. If you're a long-term trader, just dollar cost average into demand. And if there's days like this, you know, where it drops 13% a day, that's where you buy more. If you think that it's going to be, you know, the next $1 trillion company, right? Like if you're thinking about this as an Amazon or an Nvidia or something like that, every time Amazon drops 30%, I buy more, right? Anytime any of these names, Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, anytime they drop 30% from highs, I buy more. So if you think that Hood is going to be a name like that, Robinhood is going to be that common name that everyone buys on every single dip, then that's when you buy more if you're a long-term holder and long-term believer of Robinhood. Just a technical trader, it has to hold 65. All right. What was the other one? IWM. Yeah. IWM IWM is actually much weaker. Wow. Much weaker than the Qs and SPY. Yeah. Wow. Okay. IWM, let's go look at that. IWM, it's 270, right? 272 already broke. This was the low from Thursday. So now it's just 270. If we break below 270, it's going to go to 268. This is the demand from back here. And then if it reclaims, I would say the session low from, what is this, Tuesday, then we could see upside. If we reclaim that 273 session low from Tuesday, then this can turn into a squeeze back into these highs up here, 275. Okay. All right, SoFi, Hood, Hems. We could look at Hems. Hems and Hers. This is an interesting company, right? All right, so let's look at technicals. Okay, is this a higher low, right? Is this or yeah? Let's see. I mean, is this going to just start trending? I mean, we have the low here. We have a pop. We have a low. We have a pop. We have a low. Is this going to start trending from those lows? Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. But looking at pure technicals, okay. All right. Yeah, this is obvious to me. Okay. 25 to 24. This entire box. So I'll draw a box here. All right. If you're technical traders on Hems, if you're a technical trader on Hems, this was the all-time high from 2021. This was the all-time high from 2024. This was the demand that held after we broke that previous all-time high, right? You see the all-time high here. You see the all-time high here. And then once we broke that all-time high, that became demand, right? So once supply is broken, supply becomes demand, all right? Or we could say it as support resistance. Once resistance is broken, that becomes support, okay? So the resistance was broken at 24, 25, and that became support throughout 2025, right? That was the support throughout 2025. We broke below that in 2026, all right? Came back up to retest it, failed it again, but now we've reclaimed it again, okay, on Hems. So what I would do, right? If you're a technical trader, you want to be long into this area. Now that we've reclaimed it, okay? We've reclaimed this 25, 24. This is where you want to be long, all right? And you want to have stops just below this, right? Like if we lose 24, that would be your stop, okay? So, but now we've reclaimed it. This is where I'd be looking for longs on Hems. This is where I'd be looking for longs, and this has potential to, I mean, it has potential to come back into the 30s, right? If it actually holds 25, we can go back into the mid 30s on Hems, okay? This could start a trend. This could start a trend. And I would even draw this trend line, right? Draw the trend line from the lows, buy into this zone. Maybe if it hits the trend over here somewhere, you could actually buy a bit more and then use that trend line as your risk. I mean, that's what I would do personally. LLY. All right, last one. LLY. LLY. They reported earnings. Yeah, they reported earnings. I didn't see the earnings yet. Let's see. Revenue, 19.8 billion. GAAP EPS 8.26. Non-GAAP EPS 8.55. Eli Lilly's their drug showed mean weight loss of 28%. All right, so they had a good earnings, right? They had a good earnings. It's up 5.73%. They had a good earnings and it's up. It's green. All right, but is there anything that you could trade on this? Let's see. I mean, right off the bat, right? I don't see a lot here. It popped into supply. All of this is supply. All of this 920 to 930. This is all supply on Eli Lilly. I mean, where could you potentially long this? It would have to come all the way back down. I mean, into this area down here, right? This is where price was responding on Friday of last week, also on Monday of this week, and then this was a support, right? That support turned into resistance on Tuesday. That's where we failed. But if it got back into the zone, this is where you can look for longs, into this 870 to 875 area. That's where I would look for longs. Other than that, I don't see a lot here. You have a lot of supply right here. All of this is supply. So, how can you trade this? I don't know. It's in between a range, right? It's in between supply and demand. It did have strong earnings, so I guess if you wanted to trade Eli Lilly today, you could wait for it to come back into this 875 area and look for longs there. All right. So that's it for me. I hope I was a good substitute, and I'll see you guys on live. Thanks for joining.